Under the same moon. In a quiet village nestled between the hills and the sea, where lavender fields danced with the wind and the stars gleamed brighter than city lights, lived a girl named Alara. She was a painter who captured sunsets and seasons on canvas, her soul deeply rooted in the rhythm of nature. Every morning, she would wake up before dawn, climb the grassy hill near her cottage, and wait for the first light to color the sky. One misty morning, as the dew kissed the earth and the world slowly woke, Alara met someone who would change her life forever. His name was Kale. A traveler from the city, Kale was an aspiring writer, seeking inspiration in the peacefulness of the countryside. He had rented a cabin nearby, hoping to finish a novel that had long haunted his dreams. That morning, he too had climbed the hill, chasing the sunrise with a notebook in hand. They stood in silence for a while, strangers bathed in golden light. Then, as the sun broke through the mist, their eyes met. "Beautiful morning," Kale said with a smile. Alara nodded, her voice soft. "The sky always tells a story." From that moment on, they met every morning under that sky. She painted, he wrote. They shared thoughts, dreams, and quiet laughter. Alara showed Kale the hidden spots of the village, the old bridge where children played, the bakery that smelled like honey and cinnamon, the narrow paths through fields that only the locals knew. In return, Kale read her his stories, letting her into the world he built with words. Days turned into weeks, and what began as friendship slowly bloomed into something deeper, gentle, warm, and undeniable. But love, as it often does, came with its shadows. Kale's time in the village was limited. His life, his commitments, were in the city. As the summer neared its end, so did the illusion that time was endless. One night, under a sky strewn with stars, Kale held Alara's hand. "I have to leave soon," he whispered, "but I don't want this, us, to end." Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled. "Then let it begin again, wherever we are." Before he left, they made a promise: no matter where they were in the world, they would look at the moon every night and think of each other. Because no matter how far, Alara said, we'll be under the same moon. Seasons passed. Letters flew back and forth, filled with poems, sketches, confessions, and longing. Kale published his novel, dedicating it to the girl who paints dawn with her soul. Alara held an art exhibition in the city, her paintings telling the story of a love born with the sun. And then, one evening, just as she returned from the hill, she found Kale waiting by her gate, a ring in his hand, the moonlight in his eyes. "I don't want a life where you're a memory I write about," he said. "I want a life where you're beside me every morning, painting the world with your heart." She said yes without a word, just a tearful smile and a kiss beneath the stars. They stayed in that village, built a little home with wide windows and a garden full of lavender. And every morning, they still climbed that hill, a painter and a writer, writing their story, one sunrise at a time. The Garden of Eternal Spring. In a quiet French village nestled among emerald hills and wildflower meadows, there stood an old manor house with a garden that bloomed all year round. Locals called it Le Jardin de l'Eternel Printemps, the Garden of Eternal Spring. They said it was magic, but few knew the truth behind its timeless beauty. That truth began many years ago, with a young botanist named Elena Moreau. Elena had come to the village to escape the noise of Paris. She rented the manor from a kind widow and spent her days restoring the overgrown garden, studying plants, and writing poetry under the shade of blooming cherry trees. She loved the quiet, but sometimes, she wondered if her heart would ever find what it was really looking for. One rainy afternoon in early April, a knock sounded at the manor door. When Elena opened it, she found a tall man standing there, soaked to the bone, carrying a broken violin case. "I'm terribly sorry," he said with a sheepish smile. "My car broke down near the woods. May I borrow your phone?" That was how she met Julien Armand, a traveling musician who had been driving to a nearby town for a spring concert. Elena offered him tea while he waited for a mechanic. They sat by the fireplace, talking about flowers and music, the city and the countryside. Time passed quickly, and when he left that evening, Julian promised he would return to play a song for her in the garden. He did come back. Again and again. They began spending afternoons walking among roses, talking about dreams they thought they had forgotten. Julian brought his violin and played for her beneath the wisteria. Elena read her poems aloud while planting tulips and lavender. Slowly, gently, a quiet love bloomed between them. But Julian's life was still on the road, filled with performances and cities far from the peaceful village. One evening, he held her hands and said, "Elena, I don't want to leave you. But I also don't know how to stay." Tears welled in her eyes. She had been afraid at this moment. But she looked at him with a brave heart. "Then plant yourself here," she whispered. "Grow roots with me." Julian stayed. They married in the garden under a sky full of stars. Every spring, the garden grew more beautiful. Elena wrote a book of poems inspired by their love. Julian taught music to village children. Their days were filled with laughter, warmth, and the peaceful rhythm of a life shared deeply. Years passed, but their love never faded. People said the garden remained forever in spring because it had been touched by a love that never aged. Even when Elena grew old and walked more slowly, Julian would still play the violin for her under the cherry trees, the same melody he played the first day they met. And when one of them was finally gone, the garden didn't wither. It continued to bloom, year after year, a memory written in petals and sunlight, where love never died. Where the lilies bloom. In a small lakeside town nestled between green hills and endless skies, there lived a young woman named Alara. She ran a quaint flower shop called Bloom and Whispers, a place filled with the scent of fresh petals and memories of her late grandmother who once taught her that flowers could say the words people couldn't. Alara loved the quiet of the town, the morning mists, and the way the lilies on the lake bloomed at dawn. But her heart, despite its softness and warmth, held a lingering emptiness, like a letter never sent. Then came Aiden. Aiden was a travel photographer, wandering through towns and collecting stories through his lens. He arrived in the town during the heart of spring, searching not just for pictures, but perhaps, unknowingly, for something to anchor him. He stumbled upon Alara's flower shop while chasing a golden light reflecting off the lake. The first time he saw her, she had wildflowers in her hair and a streak of dirt on her cheek from repotting orchids. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Looking for something beautiful?" Aiden, caught off guard, could only nod. Over the next few weeks, Aiden kept finding reasons to visit Bloom and Whispers. He said it was the perfect place to photograph, but it became clear he was drawn to Alara more than the flowers. She'd prepare tiny bouquets for him to take on his photography walks, each holding a secret message in flower language: hope, affection, curiosity, and eventually, love. One evening, they sat by the lake as the lilies bloomed around them. Alara spoke of her dreams, how she wanted to open a second flower shop in a city she'd never been to, and how she feared change. Aiden, quiet for a moment, finally whispered, "I've traveled the world trying to find where I belong. But ever since I met you, this place, this moment, feels like home." That summer was filled with laughter, quiet glances, late-night talks under the stars, and slow dances between flower shelves. Aiden taught Alara how to use a camera, and she taught him the language of flowers. Together, they created something neither of them expected, a life stitched from tenderness, passion, and gentle courage. But as summer faded into autumn, Aiden received an offer to lead a photography expedition across Europe. It was his dream, but also his test. They stood at the lakeside, surrounded by blooming lilies, and faced the choice that all lovers must eventually make: hold on tightly or let go freely. "I don't want to lose you," Alara whispered. "You won't," he replied, holding her hand. But sometimes, love isn't just about staying. It's about growing. He left with a bouquet of white lilies and promises carved in letters, postcards, and video calls. Months passed. Seasons changed. Alara expanded her shop, started workshops, and kept sending Aiden flower messages, tucked in pressed petals within her letters. Then, one spring morning, just as the lilies began to bloom again, Aiden returned. He walked into the shop carrying a worn-down camera and a bouquet of roses and lavender, symbolizing love and devotion that never faded. He dropped to one knee and said, "Everywhere I went, I carried you with me. Now I just want to carry you for the rest of my life." Alara smiled through her tears. The lake glimmered behind them, the air full of blossoms, and the flowers whispered the words they both now knew by heart. Yes.